I never thought I'd see the day when a simple farm would spark a full-on neighborhood war. But here I am, in the middle of a giant mess with the most power-hungry HOA president I've ever met. People call her Karen, but she insists it's Mrs. Davis. She's that type of person who believes every lawn ornament should be color-coordinated and every mailbox must match her personal taste. What she definitely didn't expect was that I'm a retired police officer, still on good terms with half the precinct, and that I inherited a farm that's been in my family for generations. Before I tell you what happened, I want to welcome everyone watching this. If you're new here, make sure to subscribe, smash that like button, and drop a comment letting me know what city you're watching from. It helps this channel grow, and I promise you won't want to miss how this story unfolds. I grew up in a small town not too far from here, surrounded by wide-open fields and the smell of hay. My grandfather's farm was my favorite place in the world. It was peaceful, full of friendly animals, and offered me a sense of belonging that I never felt anywhere else. After serving in the police force for more than 20 years, I was ready for a quiet retirement, hoping to spend my days growing vegetables, raising livestock, and maybe even doing a bit of fishing in the old pond. Well, life had other plans. I inherited the property when my grandfather passed away, and I decided to move right in. The farmhouse sits on the edge of a newly built neighborhood, and while the HOA has no jurisdiction over my land, it quickly became clear that Karen, president for life of the local HOA, didn't care about legal boundaries. She believed everything in her line of sight should bow to her rules. The moment I got settled, I started getting complaints. Karen found an excuse to fuss about everything, from the color of my barn, a perfectly normal red, to the existence of my friendly old tractor. She hated that the chickens sometimes wandered close to her fence. She griped that the goats made too much noise. She even said my property was an eyesore to the rest of the community. At first, I just shrugged it off. I'd spent years dealing with high-stress calls as a cop. I figured a few fussy neighbors wouldn't break me. Unfortunately, Karen wasn't just another fussy neighbor. She was a force of nature. My first official run-in with her happened on a Saturday morning. I was unloading bales of hay from my truck when I noticed her marching down my driveway with a clipboard. She wore this tight-lipped smile that screamed, "I'm about to ruin your day." "Good morning," I said, trying to stay polite. Karen barely looked at me. "I'm afraid we have some issues to address." She slapped her clipboard. "Your barn violates the neighborhood's aesthetic guidelines, and your fence? It's the wrong style, completely out of line with our approved HOA designs." I raised an eyebrow. "Ma'am, I'm not part of your HOA. This land was zoned for agriculture before these houses existed." Karen flashed a condescending smile. "We'll see about that. As president of the HOA, I must keep our community consistent and pleasant to the eye. I can't have a big red barn sticking out like a sore thumb." I took a deep breath. I'd arrested bank robbers, gang members, and all sorts of criminals. Yet somehow this suburban tyrant was starting to unnerve me. "I have all the documents stating this property is outside your authority. If you'd like, I can show you," she huffed. "I'll be back with my lawyer." And off she marched, leaving me shaking my head. Within a few days, she escalated things. She left nasty letters in my mailbox, demanding I remove my fences. She tried to file multiple noise complaints with the local police, my old buddies, claiming my roosters were terrorizing the neighborhood at dawn. She even tried to claim I was running a commercial business without the right permits because I sold fresh eggs and vegetables at a local farmer's market. The cops who came out were mostly folks I used to work with. They'd apologize, say they had to follow up on a complaint, do a quick check, then shake their heads at the nonsense. Karen's plan was to annoy me into submission, but I had no intention of backing down. This farm was my home, my inheritance, and part of my family's legacy. Things took a bizarre turn one afternoon when I walked outside to find Karen standing by my old tractor with a tow truck. She had this triumphant smirk, as if she'd just discovered a hidden gold mine. "What do you think you're doing?" I demanded. Karen patted the side of my tractor. "This vehicle violates our neighborhood's parking standards. According to the HOA bylaws, any unauthorized vehicle will be ticketed and towed at the owner's expense." I couldn't help but laugh. "That's my farm tractor. It stays on my own property. You can't possibly be serious." She pointed to some printed pages. "It's right here in the HOA documents. No heavy machinery is allowed to be parked on residential streets, driveways, or visible in public view." I gestured around. "Karen, this is private farmland. not a suburban driveway. Doesn't matter, she snapped, waving her clipboard like a magic wand. I have a signed complaint from the entire HOA board. Now step aside. I refused to move, but the tow truck driver looked uneasy. He was just doing his job after all. I pulled out my phone to call the local police station, planning to get an official statement that they had no right to tow my farm equipment. But the situation escalated before I could connect. Karen huffed, "Fine, if you won't move, I will." Then she scrambled up onto the tractor seat, yanking at the levers like she knew what she was doing. "Ma'am, get down from there," I warned. "You're going to hurt yourself." She let out a shrill laugh and jammed the key in the ignition. "I know how to handle a simple machine." The engine roared to life and the tractor lurched forward. Karen let out a startled yelp as she accidentally shifted into gear. She tried to steer but had no idea which lever controlled the hydraulics, the brakes, or the throttle. Within seconds, the tractor rumbled straight toward a small ditch on my property. Karen panicked and yanked the wheel too hard. The machine veered sideways, crashed through a stack of hay bales, and then sputtered to a halt, half-tilted in the ditch. She was shaken but unhurt, her face pale as she realized what had just happened. I rushed over. "Are you okay?" Karen's voice trembled, but she tried to maintain her dignity. "How dare you let me drive such a dangerous piece of equipment?" I stared at her in disbelief. "You hopped on without permission. That's trespassing, and you nearly injured yourself. Also, you ruined several bales of hay." The tow truck driver approached, obviously rattled. He shook his head. "I'm sorry, man. I don't think I can tow that tractor. I'm not even sure this is legal." Karen, now flustered, stumbled away from the tractor, refusing to make eye contact. "This isn't over," she muttered, marching off. But the cracks in her armor were showing. She had just proven she was willing to do reckless things to get her way, and now there was tangible proof she'd overstepped her bounds. If I thought the tractor incident was the height of lunacy, I was wrong. A few weeks later, I organized a gathering in my barn to rehearse a Christmas pageant with a small group from my church. We planned to do a little nativity performance for the community come December. Nothing fancy, just a few people singing carols, reading scripture, maybe dressing up in biblical costumes. The day before our second rehearsal, I got a call from a former colleague at the police department. "Hey, you might want to know about a complaint that just came in. Something about a cult on your property?" I practically dropped the phone. "A cult?" He chuckled. "Yeah, apparently you're housing robed figures who chant in a suspicious manner. That's the exact wording. The report also says you might be hoarding illegal substances." I rubbed my temples. "Let me guess. Karen?" He sighed. "Sure looks like it. She's the only one who's filed repeated complaints. And all your neighbors say you're hosting a harmless Bible study group. But you know how it goes. We have to check every complaint." Later that evening, 2 officers drove up to my barn. One of them I knew from my time on the force, and the other was a rookie who'd heard all about the farmland fiasco. They stepped inside, only to find a bunch of us in simple shepherd and angel costumes, practicing Christmas lines. A couple kids were reciting lines about the Star of Bethlehem. We even had a small donkey calmly chewing hay in the corner, playing the part of the stable donkey. The rookie looked around, wide-eyed. This sure doesn't look like a cult." My buddy from the force shook his head. "No, it doesn't. Let me guess. Karen again?" I shrugged. "She thinks anything that isn't to her taste must be evil or illegal." One of the church ladies, still wearing a halo and carrying a plastic baby Jesus, asked, "Is something wrong, officer?" He smiled kindly. "No, ma'am, you're all good. We're just responding to a complaint. Clearly, it's unfounded." The officers left, promising to file an official statement that it was a false alarm. I felt a flicker of relief, but also a jolt of anger that Karen was taking things so far. It was one thing to grumble about noise or animals, but accusing us of cult activity? That was hitting below the belt, especially given it was a simple Bible study group. All these false complaints and petty tactics eventually stirred up enough trouble that Karen started attracting the wrong kind of attention, her own. People in the neighborhood weren't thrilled about their HOA president calling the cops nonstop. After all, police cars showing up at random hours, sirens blaring, were more of a nuisance than any barn or goat could ever be. Meanwhile, Karen decided to launch yet another crusade. This time, she printed out evidence from the county clerk's office, claiming my farmland was technically under some obscure regulation that forbade me from selling produce without a special commercial license. She tried to post these documents on the community bulletin board, hoping to rally neighbors against me. But something else happened. The more Karen stuck her nose into local paperwork, the more neighbors started digging into the HOA's finances. Rumors spread that Karen was imposing fines for trivial matters, like leaving a garden hose out overnight and funneling that money into special community projects no one had ever heard of. Some folks began to wonder where all those funds were really going. By the time I caught wind of it, it was too late for Karen. The situation was snowballing, and I hadn't even done anything except mind my own farm. One morning, I was in my barn cleaning out stalls when I heard sirens. I left the barn to see 2 police cruisers pulling up, lights flashing. My heart sank. Another complaint, I thought, rolling my eyes. Sure enough, Karen stepped out from behind the squad cars, arms crossed like she owned the county. I recognized one of the officers, Sergeant Miller, a man I trained back in my day. The look on his face told me he was already tired of this nonsense. "Morning, folks," I said calmly, wiping my hands on a rag. "What's the emergency this time?" Sergeant Miller sighed. "We got a report about illegal livestock, unpermitted commercial activity, potential trespassing on community land." Karen took a step forward. "That's right. He's been abusing HOA regulations, and I demand you issue citations immediately." I pressed my lips together. "Karen, this farm isn't under HOA jurisdiction." She let out a humorless laugh. "We'll see about that. I have documents proving he's violating multiple codes." She reached into her fancy folder, but Sergeant Miller and the rookie officer didn't even bother taking the papers. They'd seen this show before. "Ma'am," Sergeant Miller said, "we've investigated these claims. This farm is recognized by the county as legal agricultural land. He's got every right to keep his animals, sell produce, and run this place as he sees fit." Karen's smirk wavered. Then she thrust another sheaf of papers forward. "But these forms show he's operating a commercial business next to a residential area. That's not allowed." Sergeant Miller gave me an exasperated glance. "Mind if I see your farm permits again, sir?" "Sure." I went inside and grabbed my file of paperwork, the same one I'd shown them countless times already. A few minutes later, the officers confirmed everything was in order. Karen's face turned crimson. "This is an outrage. You can't just protect him because he's a retired cop. This is corruption." Sergeant Miller's eyes narrowed. "Ma'am, we're not covering for anyone. We follow the law, and the law is on his side. Now, unless you have legitimate evidence of an actual crime, we're done here." I expected Karen to explode, but then something happened that neither of us saw coming. A third car pulled in behind the squad cars, a sleek black sedan with tinted windows. Out stepped a man in a suit carrying a briefcase. "Who on earth is that?" Karen sneered. Sergeant Miller lifted a brow. "I called in a favor," he said, nodding at me. "We've been hearing your complaints for a while now, and it's time we got a state-level opinion." The man in the suit introduced himself as Mr. Leland from the State Agricultural Protection Bureau. "Morning, everyone," he said, nodding politely. "I'm here to address claims of interference with the protected agricultural property." Karen bristled. "Protected? There's no way this place is protected." Leland offered a measured smile. "According to the Right to Farm Act, which your state adopted decades ago, any farm established before suburban expansion can't be forced to relocate or drastically alter its operations due to new residential developments." He glanced at me. "You are Mr. Carter, correct?" "Yes, sir. My family's been farming here for generations. The house is older than this entire neighborhood." Leland turned back to Karen. "Ma'am, are you aware that repeated attempts to shut down a legally recognized farm or filing false reports to local authorities can result in legal consequences under the same act?" Karen's jaw dropped. "This is ridiculous. I'm only doing my duty as HOA president to maintain property values." Leland's face remained neutral. "Your HOA has no legal authority over farmland, especially farmland that predates the neighborhood. Furthermore, if you've been filing complaints and misrepresenting the farm's activities, you could be liable for harassment." Karen started trembling with rage. "He's the one harassing us with noise and smell. He's the one bringing in suspicious groups, like that weird cult." Sergeant Miller tilted his head. "You mean the church group that was practicing Christmas carols? Because we investigated that and found zero wrongdoing." Karen's eyes darted around. I could see panic setting in. "Well, what about the finances? He's selling produce, eggs, and who knows what else. That's illegal. Leland flipped through some documents. Actually, direct farm sales are permitted under the state's agricultural commerce guidelines, provided the produce is grown on site or legally sourced. From what I understand, he's fully compliant. At that moment, another police cruiser arrived, a young officer stepping out with a clipboard. Sergeant Miller, we just got confirmation from the county clerk's office about suspicious HOA finances. We need to bring Miss Davis in for questioning. Karen blinked, stunned. What? Me? Why? The young officer continued. We've found irregularities in how certain HOA fines have been collected and spent. Looks like thousands of dollars are unaccounted for. We have to follow up. A ripple of shock went through the small crowd that had gathered to watch. Some neighbors stepped forward, exchanging nervous glances. Mr. Reynolds, a longtime resident, cleared his throat. Karen, is that true? All those fines you've been issuing for silly reasons, where did that money go? Karen spluttered. It's none of your business. I was trying to maintain order in this community. You people just don't appreciate the effort. Leland stepped aside, letting the police handle their investigation. Sergeant Miller looked Karen right in the eyes. Ma'am, we'll need to see the HOA's financial records. If the county clerk has flagged them, we're dealing with potential fraud. Karen's face went beet red. She pointed at me. He's behind this somehow. He's using his police connections to fabricate these charges. I threw up my hands. Ma'am, I've done nothing but defend my right to run this farm. If you've been skimming from the HOA, that's on you. The young officer held out a pair of handcuffs. Miss Davis, you'll have to come with us to the station. We have some questions about these finances. That's when Karen completely lost it, screaming about conspiracies, bribery, and corruption. But the neighbors weren't buying it anymore. They'd seen her antics, her recklessness, and now there was evidence she'd abused her position. Karen was cuffed, still ranting about how unfairly she was being treated. The sight was almost surreal. This woman who had bullied the entire neighborhood into submission, now being led away by the police. Mr. Reynolds broke the stunned silence. Well, I guess that's that. No more insane fines for my mailbox color. A few neighbors let out relieved chuckles, though some were still in shock that their HOA president had been taken in for questioning. Sergeant Miller sighed. We'll conduct a thorough investigation. If she's been embezzling HOA funds or filing false reports, it won't go well for her. Leland approached me. Mr. Carter, I apologize it took this long for everything to come to light. The State Agricultural Department will support you if any further legal action is needed. I shook his hand. I appreciate that. I just want to live in peace. Leland nodded. I believe you'll finally get it. And if there are any more false reports, you have my card. As the police cruisers drove off, Karen's shouts faded into the distance. A group of neighbors came up to me, offering apologies. They said they'd let Karen push them around for too long, fining them for petty stuff because they were afraid of her. One woman admitted, I was worried if I didn't sign her petitions, she'd find a reason to fine me too. All I could do was shrug. Well, hopefully we can start fresh. This farm's not here to bother anyone. I just want to grow my crops and share a few eggs with folks who want them. If you ever need fresh produce, I'm your guy. We all shared a laugh, and for the first time I felt a real sense of community. I thought the story was over once Karen got taken in. But about a week later, I received a letter in the mail. It was from Karen, written on the back of an old HOA notice of all things. The handwriting was shaky, like she'd written it in a hurry. Dear Mr. Carter, I don't expect you to forgive me. I acted out of fear and greed. This neighborhood was my chance to feel important, and I let that power go to my head. I heard a rumor that the state might press charges. I just want you to know I never meant for things to go this far. Maybe if things had been different, we could have gotten along. Karen, Mrs. Davis. I stared at the note, not sure how to feel. Part of me was still angry at her for all the chaos she caused. Another part felt a twinge of pity. Maybe she realized how badly she messed up. As it turned out, the state did press charges, but mostly for financial mismanagement and filing fraudulent complaints. She ended up facing a substantial fine and was removed from her HOA position. Some rumored she moved to another town to start over. Others said she was forced to sell her house to pay for her legal fees. Whatever the truth, the neighborhood breathed easier. My farm continued to thrive, especially when Christmas came and our nativity pageant went off without a hitch. We even invited some local kids to see the goats and chickens afterward. No one complained about the noise. If you've watched this far, don't forget to subscribe so you never miss a new story. Hit that like button to show your support, and let me know in the comments which city you're tuning in from. It's always a blast to see how far our little community extends.